I think is it that one? Okay, maybe. Okay. Thank you very much. Let's see what happens. See if it works. Yeah, now it's in. There we go. Okay, and let me just bring up the okay. Okay, so our last tshuva, and we've got that on the screen, and now I just got to share the screen here. Let's see if it's working. The other thing. I've never seen that screen before, but I'll take it. I don't know. It must be recording. I have a sense it's recording, but who knows? Does it say it? Okay. All right. Let's hope so. It's really weird. Okay. Okay. Let's just hope it's recording, and then we'll be all set. Okay. So we learned the tshuva about the Omoti Tain Scharo for Chatzi Shir that we finished already. And now we're on another tshuva. Okay. What page were we on? Yeah. Kufyud. Beis. Kufyud Gimel was Zuchut Pitzuyim La'avodat Meshek Bayit, severance for a domestic worker. Okay. And now we're up to Kufyud Daled. Is it possible to negotiate with a worker that he will forego or forgive some of his severance package payout? So the shaila is, an employer negotiates a contract with an employee that upon the termination of his employment, he will not be entitled to any severance package. And he does that when he hires the guy. Like he says, here, sign the contract, and the contract includes, this is the complete amount of your compensation package. You acknowledge that you're not entitled to any severance payment, no matter how long you work for the company. Sign here. Okay, is this ever done?
Always, it's valid unless it's less than the statutory minimum.
Statutory minimum.
Unless it's void, but anything above the basic.
So that's right. So that's Dina de Malchus in Ontario. Okay.
Does he get any consideration for signing that? Just the job? Like they don't give him something up front so that he doesn't get something at the end. We're just
so you're saying that you're asking from a legal standpoint, does he have to get some kind of consideration?
I mean,
well, the employee might be told, well, you're getting we're giving you a high salary in lieu of a severance package. Okay, let's see. Al pi halacha, afilu im adam matne al masha kasav batorah b'davar shehu mamon teno kayim kevin shemamon nitain lemechila. So we started this tshuva already, and we learned that halachically, even if a person makes a stipulation in a financial transaction that is contrary to the Torah, it's still normally binding, except we learned like in cases of ribis, because two consenting adults can arrange any kind of financial agreement that they like. The Inyan Tashlum Pitzuyim Yeshlo Remez Batorah, Shematzinu Gabi Eved Ivri Sha'aved Mishne Schar Sachir, HaTorah omeres v'chi tishalachenu lo tishalachenu rekam ha'nektani klo mitzanacha migornacha miyikvecha. And we know that an Eved Ivri is entitled, even though he works for 6 years and he goes free on the 7th, the Torah says that when you send him free, do not send him away empty-handed, and you shall rather give him some parting gifts from your sheep, your grain, and your wine. And we learned from there, like we learned from the Sefer HaChinuch, that there's a moral principle, at least midioraisa, to compensate someone at the termination of their employment. Ulam me'achar uvechuke hamedina in bekoach ha'oved levater al zchut ha'pitzuyim shemagia lo mima'avido. However, Dina de Malchusa steps in and does not allow an employee to forego his severance rights. Velo moil mashihitna meroshim ha'oved shlo yishalim pitzuyim. I guess this is in Israel, similar to Ontario, that there's a certain minimum that a person is entitled to after having worked a certain number of years for an employer, that the employer is obligated to pay. And the Mishnah says that when it comes to hiring workers, everything goes according to standard minhag of the place in which you live. And therefore it would seem that such an employment contract would be void. Even though the Rashba writes that when it comes to a dina de malchusa, the law of the land, if it contravenes Torah law, it's considered to be thievery and not fair law. So, for example, if the government says that on all loans you must pay interest, let's say they have such a statute that we don't want to see lenders exploited. So whenever people loan money, it has to be a minimum of, let's say, a 3% interest payment. You can't charge less. Okay, and that's obviously forbidden by the Torah. Lo omrim bazeh dina de malchusa dina. We don't say that the law of the land prevails. Amnam zuchut hapitzuyim lo doma lazeh. However, with that said, we cannot make the comparison between, let's say, interest payments and severance rights. Ki matzinu shekasov harama shehaminagu lahachzir kol geneva afilu la'achar yeush v'shinei reshus mikoach dina de malchusa dina. Because here's where the Ramah says, when you have to deliberate between Dina de Malchusa and Halacha, you go with Dina de Malchusa. So the Ramah's example is that if you discover stolen property and you can fairly ascertain that the original owner of the stolen property has had Yeush, the Halacha is you're allowed to keep it. You don't have to return it. But if the law of the land says that if you know who the original owner was, you're obligated to return it, then the Ramah paskins, you have to return it. Even though the Shach writes, so the Shach in his commentary to this portion of the Shulchan Aruch says that normally we don't say that Dina de Malchusa trumps Torah law. Mikol makom danin bedin zeh shel geneva kedina de malchusa kevin shegam b'Yisrael nohagu kein. However, the reason why we side with Dina de Malchusa in this particular halacha is because many Jews have accepted upon themselves to act accordingly, meaning that even if the government had not instituted this requirement, that if you find stolen goods, you must return them, many Jews would do so anyway out of the goodness of their heart. And because this is recognized as an ethical way of comporting society, the Torah, even though the Torah says you're allowed to keep it, this is not a contravention of the Torah if you go ahead and return the stolen item.
It doesn't prohibit you giving it.
Right. In other words, right. The Torah doesn't prohibit you. Right? Va'afal pi sheminha garua shehudin neged din Torah laholchim acharav Pshita diyesh biyad chachmei hador letaken takanos ad kan devarav. And therefore, even we normally wouldn't follow just a regular, just a minhag that is not well sourced if it goes against the Torah, but the Chachamim can still institute rules to go above and beyond the rules of the Torah. And here too, we would say that the Chachamim would endorse a Dina de Malchusa such as this. V'chein kosav harama, hamatzl meha'ari u'mehado v'zuto shel yom u'shliluso shel nahar, harei elu shelo, afilu habal habayis, omeid v'tzavach. The Ramah says a similar halacha in Siman Reish Nun Tes. We've learned this halacha before. If a guy sees somebody's item of value flowing down the river, where everyone, well, not the river, but let's say in the middle of the ocean, a guy's treasure chest drops to the bottom of the ocean. So normally we say that that's Yeush, and you're allowed to, if you go and get some scuba equipment and go down and retrieve the treasure chest, you're allowed to keep it. Obviously, you don't want to do like those billionaires did when they had that guy, that company build the submarine for them. Yeah. Not a good idea, right? Or if, let's say, we also know that if a lion walks off with somebody's stuff, we assume that the owner was miyash because he knows he's never going to get it back. It's completely lost to the entire world. He knows he's never going to see it again. And therefore, if somehow by some miracle, you are able to retrieve that item that the lion walked away with, or that a bear walked away with, like a picnic basket, so then you would be able to keep it for yourself. Hare elu shelo. We know that the halacha says that you're allowed to keep it. And that's true even if the owner says, hey, that's mine. You can say, finders keepers, sorry, mister, because in this case, there's no mitzvah of hashavas aveda when something is completely irretrievable for a certain amount of time. There's no one who can access it. So therefore, it's completely the connection between the ownership of this item and the item are completely severed. And therefore, the halacha says you're allowed to keep it.
Under the ocean, if the original owner was also hiring a scuba person to go and get it, they were both after it. Would that change it? Because then he wasn't the ice.
So I guess it depends on how irretrievable it's considered. If it's considered to be not irretrievable because we have the technology to get it, so then that would be a different situation. So
that's with this. If someone's BI's, it's a friend of yours, and you find it a year later, you know it was important to him, and you just say,
that's right.
Where's the show? If it's a non-Jew, you're going to cause Choshen, you're going to cause
right.
It's a Choshen anyway.
So that's why the Dina de Malchusa trumps it. And the Ramah says here as well, Aval im gazer hamelech o based in shiachsir chayev lahachsir mekov Dina de Malchusa Dina o hefker based in hefker.
So how can a basin tell you to return it? If
you're how can a basin do that? So the government can do it from the principle of Dina de Malchusa Dina. The basin can do it because of another principle called hefker based in hefker. What does hefker based in hefker mean? Anything that the basin deems to be no ownerless is ownerless. They were vested, in other words, when you are part of a Jewish community, you have to abide by the psak of the Chachamim, and the Torah awards the Chachamim the ability to even if it goes against normative law, to award the opposing party monetary gifts. So therefore, the Beis Din has the authority to do that. The government has the authority to do it, and they can tell you, you must go above and beyond the letter of the law, and you must return that item. So therefore, you do see that there are times when you have to follow the law of the land, as long as it doesn't directly contravene what the Torah says you cannot do. In other words, I guess what we're seeing emerging is that if there's a standard in society that doesn't go against what the Torah says you shall not do, but it's something that it tells you should pay money that you would normally not be obligated to pay according to halacha, right? But you're not committing an isser if you pay out that money, like when paying out interest. So then you have to follow Dina de Malchusa. So, okay, so far we're okay. Now, that's the argument to obligate the employer to pay a severance package. Ubeir b'shut tshuvos v'hanhagos, Rav Sternbach explains, the me'achar sheminag hamadina l'shalim pitzuyim, v'nitkapel minhag ze bevate dinin shemechayivim l'shalim pitzuyim kevin sheyesh bo min ha'egionot, that this has now become the accepted standard in Eretz Yisrael to pay severance to a long-term employee. It has become such a standard that even if you go to Beis Din, the Beis Din will obligate you to do that according to the standards of the Medina, of what the secular courts would say. So, and because there's an aspect of ethics, there's an aspect of propriety to do so, and therefore, Adam sha'avad v'hevi to'eles l'bal habayis, if a person was a faithful employee, he provided benefit to the employer, chayav l'shalim lo pitzuyim, then the employer must pay him severance. Then it's tantamount to the Beis Din of the time mandating that severance must be paid. Umamela b'takana zu yesh litzadeit shelo yoyel ma shehamavid hitna merosh shelo yishalim pitzuyim, and therefore there's every reason to argue that even if there was an explicit contract at the outset of the employment saying that you're not entitled to any severance, that would not be valid. Because if we didn't avoid that kind of contract, then there would never be severance paid out. Because any employer could just stick a piece of paper in front of an employee, say, here, sign this, and then void the entire concept of severance. V'lachein yesh litzaded. That's an interesting language. In other words, he's not emphatic about this psak, but he says, this is what I'm leaning towards. To be mitzaded means I'm leaning towards this ruling. Keven shabate hadin biyamenu mechayvim l'shalim pitzuyim. That since even the bate din require payment of severance, kalul bazeh gaminag hamadina shelo yoil lahatnot meroshim apo levater la pitzuyim. That would be true to go that you'd have to follow the minhag hamadina even when there was a contract signed stating to the contrary.
So what was the havamina of the question then? So it's clear that it's null and void. I don't even see the havamina of the question.
The havamina is two consenting parties enter into a financial agreement. It's like basically saying it's the same shaila as what if I'm willing to hire you, but I'm going to pay you $1 less than the minimum wage. So why can't I do that? If you agree to it, if you agree to the terms, shouldn't I be allowed to do it? It's the same shaila. In other words, is an employee allowed to accept a substandard working condition for himself because he's desperate and he really needs the money? And this is probably a shaila that comes up a lot. Let's say if a guy's running a cash business and he wants to hire a yeshiva bacher or a girl who just came out of seminary, and he says to her, listen, this is off the books, which is illegal, by the way. We all know that. This is off the books, but I'm going to pay you, what's minimum wage now?
$16.75 or something?
$16.75. I can't afford $16.75 an hour because this is just a fledgling business, but I'll give you $15 an hour. That's the most that I can afford, but we'll do, it's off the books, not taking anything off, yada, 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 yada.
The 15 off the books is like 25.
Yeah. So I would take it and run.
So what do you say? What do you say?
Money and run.
Yeah. Take the money and
There's a
run.
word there that you said that faithful servant. So that discretion of employer is the servant faithful. But if that person not faithful, that's a way out of it.
I mean, anyone who's a long-term employee
Why'd you
is
keep them if they're?
prima facie is a
Almost like
faithful
no-
employee.
No choice, somebody out there. I'm just saying the word faithful is one way up for a lawyer to say, hey, what's faithful?
Yeah, I don't think he's using this as a legal condition. He says, sha'avad vehe, well, I said, adam sha'avad, a person who worked, vehevi to'elet lebal habayit. He brought benefit to his employer. Yeah, I stuck in faithful. Maybe I shouldn't have stuck that in. Yeah, okay. So it's on that basis that the argument is that you can't play games with this. And now, like Moish said, there may be certain situations where an employer said, look, I've paid you under the table for years. You never had to file a tax return, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And now you're going to argue on Dina de Malchusa. I'll tell you what, just like you want to use Dina de Malchusa now, let's tell the government how much you've made for the last 10 years. And
It's mustering, though, that's another thing, you're mustering on the person.
well, this guy is saying, oh, you got to give me
Well, it's
severance.
two ways. If he
Yeah.
wants to come back, you can go
Yeah.
back with that.
Right. However, I don't know if that would be a successful argument, because the employer could say, let's go to a Basin. Okay. I'm not interested in going through the employment board and stuff like that to make sure that I've done everything up and up. You're claiming that you're entitled to severance based on Dina de Malchusa. Let's go to a Basin. The Basin, based on what Rav Sharaga is writing in Eretz Yisrael, would say, of course you got to pay severance, right? Even though you agreed beforehand that you wouldn't be entitled to severance, you should pay severance because it's the right thing to do, and even the government requires this. And then the balabayas, the employer, would say, yeah, but I paid him under the table, and there was nothing according to Dina de Malchusa. So the Beis Din would have the prerogative to teach this guy a lesson, this ne'er-do-well employer who's cheating the government and running an illegal business. Okay. And they would, if I was on that Beis Din, I would say, okay, so should we tell the government now that, this guy, let's do everything according to Dina de Malchusa then. Let's go to the employment board or whatever body there is. Let's go to the CRA, make sure that you've been filing your taxes, et cetera, et cetera. And boy, this guy's going to have a big headache. Okay, so bottom line is that Rav Sharaga paskins that even if the employee signed a document, logic would dictate that the employer still cannot exploit the employee and has to give him some kind of severance, something that fulfills the minimum of what the government would say. The statute would say.
It's an apprentice arrangement. Or I'll pay you $15 and I'll teach you
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a legitimate argument. Every case is going to be unique, right? Every case is going to be unique. Obviously, if you're apprenticing, there are times, I mean, isn't there a provision in Ontario law for apprenticeship where you don't have to pay someone anything? Internship, apprenticeship, yeah.
There was a time that's true. You couldn't pay the
Yeah, that's true today also. Yeah, like a kid's in university and he wants to spend his summer interning.
Yeah, they build their resume with the free experience.
Right. Okay, so let's take a look at for whatever remaining time we have. Let's take a look at this footnote. He says, so the Sefer Chuvas Van Hagos, it's from Rav Sternbach. He brings proof from something the Rama writes. That even though if a person had an item stolen and he was miyayish, there's no obligation to return that item if you find it. But if the king decrees that even when you find stolen property that was, from years back, you have to return it to the original owner, then you must abide by Dina de Malchusa. Ubir Hashach. So the Shach explains, the Afal Gav de Mina Garua Shu Negator Lo Azlinan Batre, Yesh Lomar, Shemina Kazeh Shenischan Kach, Yeshkoch Biyad Hador Letakein Takana Kazu, Va'od de Gambadina de Malchusa Kachu Ad Kantochen Devarav. The Shach says that even though a petty minhag that goes against Torah law, you normally don't have to follow, but in a situation like this, where it was accepted even within the Jewish community to do such a thing, and it's now the law of the land, then that's something that can trump the Torah requirements. Nimsa de im yesh minhag tov shetiknu b'medina. So it turns out that if there's a good practice that transcends Torah law, that is instituted by the Medina, Azlinan Batre, Afal Pi Shemeikar Hadin Torah Ein Hadin Kain. You have to follow it, even though the Torah does not require you. So the Dina de Malchusa is you can't have two wives, right? I think that's a minhag tov, right? Wouldn't you agree? It's a minhag tov. One is enough, right? So it's also Dina de Malchusa. So even without Rabbeinu Gershom's takana, we would probably have to abide by bigamy laws because it's a minhag tov. It's something that is good for family harmony and fostering more healthy relationships between husbands and wives. There are probably a number of halachas like this. The Torah permits slavery, right? But the Dina de Malchusa is slavery is illegal. So that's a minhag tov, right? Does it go against Torah law? The Torah says you are allowed to have a slave. Yes, right? So even if you have two consenting parties that are willing to enter into a master-slave relationship, it is as inconceivable as that might seem. But let's say a guy says to a fellow, I'm willing to bail out your business, right? But I own you for the next 6 years. You have to work for me without pay for the next 6 years if I bail out your business. And you have to answer every beck and call. You might find people that are willing to do that, but that's an eved, and it goes against the minhag haMedina that you can't have a slave. Okay, v'lachein kasav. So we'll have to hold it here. We're out of time. Okay, but this is the
Butler and slave. How do you define it?